All right, good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this week's Zoom with the principal. We won't be together next week because we will have the week off for Thanksgiving. So hopefully next Wednesday, you guys are enjoying a sleep in or whatever else you would do on a Wednesday morning besides spending it with us. So our topic today, like I said in my newsletter, this is a new topic for us, though I think that we'll probably revisit things that we've talked about in the past. But several weeks ago, Yvonne and I were having a conversation that maybe it would be a good idea to talk about, well, and our conversation was specifically talking about medication and giving advice to parents on medication and should they go down that road, should they not. I find in my role, that is something I have not necessarily that parents ask me about, but I have come across that there's a lot of hesitation, where parents are very reluctant to try medication. I definitely have my opinions about it. And I have one child that medication has been a game changer, completely. I'm like kicking myself that we didn't start it sooner because it has made such a positive difference. And I have another child that medication is necessary, but she has struggled more with it. And we've had to try different varieties of medication and different dosages and to find what works and what doesn't. And it hasn't just been an easy thing. So we are going to talk about other topics besides just medication. This is really kind of because we've talked so far this year, we talked about executive functioning and ADHD. We've talked about anxiety. Last week, we talked about depression. And so today we're going to talk about okay, you have this diagnosis. How do you treat it? So I'm going to turn it over to Yvonne and Amy. I'm assuming you're going to jump into, and we've got both of our social workers here today, and you guys are the experts. So turning the stage over to you.
And just to clarify, we are not medical doctors. We are not giving medical advice. We're just coming from the perspective of, what is our role as a social worker? And our role is, when kids do get prescribed medication through their psychiatrist, we want to make sure that they're adhering to that medication and that they're doing it safely. And if they have questions about, we always recommend that they talk to the doctor, they talk to psychiatrists, but we definitely do spend a lot of our time, reminding kids that you can't just stop taking your medication. And, in my personal experience, in my professional experience, I have seen, as Ms. Davis said, I've seen it be a game changer. I've also seen it not really be the best fit for some people. Everybody's different. Every family's different. This is more just some education about what it is, what it does, when it's helpful, how to know if it could be helpful, who to reach out to, how to support your kid, how to even have that conversation. Because I feel like a lot of times the kiddos will bring it up or the doctor will bring it up and it's just kind of an immediate shutdown. So I just want to talk about when it can be helpful and what it does. So overall, we're going to talk about treatment options because as Ms. Davis said, it's okay, you have this diagnosis, you have this kid that needs support. What is the next step? Now what? What do we do? So I am going to share my screen. It's always my struggle. Did I do it?
Yes, it's loading, but yes, there you go.
We're with bright orange today. So just treatment options in general. And if you have any questions as we're going through this, feel free to throw them in the chat. Feel free to speak out. This is definitely your forum to ask questions. And so I want to talk a little bit about the fact that most people with a mental health condition are not being treated. I've read different statistics. I think with adults, it's at least half of people are not actually being treated when they have a diagnosed mental health disorder. I think the stats for teenagers, the last I checked was I think it was 18% of teens with a mental health issue are actually being treated for it. And this is something that I think we can kind of validate in our work is we talk to a lot of kids who have a history of depression, a history of anxiety, and have never actually received treatment. And there's a lot of reasons for that. as much as we talk about mental health now, there's still a lot of stigmas about it. And, there's a ton of reasons, like, so what prevents people from treating their mental illness? And I think a whole list, fear of judgment. I think fear of change. When I say fear of change, sometimes you have students who have been depressed for so long, they don't even know what quote unquote normal feels like. And that worry about what's going to change if I start to feel better is a legitimate worry for some kids. And so sometimes just avoiding the unknown. Sometimes, people know that in therapy, oftentimes things come up, things from people's past come up, and some people just don't want to face that or not prepared to face that. So that could be another reason. Some people don't believe in treatment. They just think it's not going to work. I've talked to people before, nothing's going to help me. This is kind of my destiny to feel the way that I feel. That's a reason that people don't get treatment. They don't understand mental health. They don't understand how treatable it is. So sometimes I kind of think back with my own bouts of anxiety and depression when I was younger. And one of the reasons I avoided treatment was because I was so terrified that it wasn't going to work and I would lose hope. So I don't know if that makes sense. It was like, if I don't do the treatment and it doesn't work, then that's okay. But if I do it and it doesn't work, then what? I don't have any other options. So for me, that was kind of my fear of being treated. Sometimes the actual treatment is fearful, taking medication or talking to somebody. We ask our students to do something that is very difficult, and that is to open up to a complete stranger about the deepest, darkest things that are going on in their life. And that's a big ask. And sometimes I forget that. And I'll be sitting with a student for an hour and they're just like sharing and sharing. And I'm like, wow, I'm really honored that you shared that with me. Because that can be really scary. The other thing is time restraints. This is one that I get a lot. A lot of times, like, we'll have kids who have significant mental health issues. They'll have been hospitalized, and then the doctor recommends a treatment program, like an IOP program, which is something that they do after school for several hours a day. And, people are just like, I don't have the time in my life. I don't even have time to get my homework done. So why am I going to spend 3 hours, getting mental health support 3 times a week? It's too much. And so that is a huge barrier to why people would not want to get treatment. Ginny's nodding. You know about IOP?
I do. And I was just thinking, actually, I have a couple of things to say. But about the IOP, my daughter did go through IOP, and I hate to say this. I mean, it was like kind of like a happy accident, just the timing of when she was hospitalized and everything was going on with her. Like, it just timed out that she did IOP over the summer. And so we had the time she wasn't in school. It worked out. It was perfect. By the time she started school again in the fall, we had gotten through IOP, and then we were doing family therapy, which was still a time commitment, but not the intense time commitment that IOP is. I can totally understand the amount of stress trying to do IOP and be in school full time. That's a lot. Because it was like every afternoon, evening, for like 3 hours, like 5 days a week. I mean, it was a lot. And another thing I want to say about fear of actual treatment, one thing that I experienced with my daughter, she had a therapist, and the therapist was not a good fit. We knew it wasn't a good fit, but she had a real reluctance of trying to find a new therapist and kind of starting over and telling her story again. Like, she's like, oh, I know it's not right, but I don't have to like explain everything again. And so I feel like sometimes that can be a barrier too.
That is huge, especially when we have interns that stay with us for one school year. So the following year it's somebody else. So sometimes we have kids that are like, it took me so long to get to know Miss So-and-so. I just don't want to do that all over again. So that is definitely a barrier. We've been saying the word IOP, just so everybody knows, if you're not familiar, IOP is an intensive outpatient program. And basically, and Amy, you might correct me if I'm wrong, but the way I envision IOP, it's kind of like the in-between just going to therapy and being hospitalized. There's like this middle area of like, you need a little bit more than just a weekly check-in with your therapist. You need something a little more intense. And that's when they do groups, they do parent work, they do just kind of this full scale like support plan as people are, transitioning out of being hospitalized. we don't want to just go from like, I was in the hospital for a week to I'm checking with my therapist every other week. That doesn't really work. So that's what IOP
Yeah.
is.
And I want to say,
Yeah.
as a parent who's had a child go through IOP, yes, it was a lot, but it was also a game changer. It's what set my daughter back on like the path of like health and wellness and taking care of herself. So yeah, it's a lot, but it's worth it.
Yeah.
If you have a doctor that's recommending an IOP program, that means your child needs it. And I guess like my harsh truth is figure that out and make it work, because it's really important and it will make a difference.
For those of you that have been with, Miss Davis and I for a long time, I've talked about my struggle very openly with anxiety. And for me, after being pretty much housebound with anxiety for 12 years, IOP for me was an absolute game changer. Like it was exactly what I needed. It got me on the path to where I am now. And it's actually what got me to go into social work. I wanted to actually work in a program like that. Didn't work out quite that way, but it absolutely changed my life.
May I
So
ask a question?
yeah, of course.
Yeah, I don't know whether from 405 and IOP, if you have a 405 and you have
504 plan.
504 and then you have IOP or no? What the connection between the 504 and IOP?
There's not necessarily a connection. Sometimes, so the IOP is outside of school, like that doesn't necessarily, like we will accommodate like and making the schedule work. So sometimes the doctor may recommend, or the therapist in the IOP program may recommend having a 504 plan, because the IOP program is such a time commitment that students may need like extra time to turn in assignments and like things like that, or a reduced workload. And so that's what the 504 plan can bring. The 504 plan is about school and like accommodations that are being provided in the class. Sometimes it's necessary, sometimes it's not. Sometimes the teachers are flexible and like it's like they're like, oh, it's fine, you can turn in work late. That we take that on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, yeah.
Just to clarify the go ahead.
Yeah, I understand, because both of my kids have well, one of my kids have treatment outside, and she just started school this year. I don't know if she qualified for 504, but another one is in middle school, and she have treatment, but it's interrupted because it's very hard to find a therapist. And then if we have a while, and then the job turnover of the therapist is really fast, so it's only for a while to different job, and then they discharge her, and it is really hard outside, and then I run around crazy.
Yeah.
No,
So
absolutely. If your child is being treated outside and there might be a need for a 504 plan, I want you to reach out to me directly, send me an email so that we can connect and talk a little bit more about what type of support we have for your child here at school.
Okay, I think I give you something last week in the chat, but maybe I'll be email you.
Oh, maybe I didn't see it. I'm sorry.
So I just put Yvonne's email address in the chat, and I also put Mr. Campbell's email address. He's our associate principal that's kind of in charge of the 504s. So those are two people that you would want to reach out to. Yvonne, also in the chat, and this may be something that you're going to go over. How do you qualify for an IOP program? And realize that's not something that we do at school. But that's
now I get it. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what the requirements are. I just know from my experience, generally speaking, my kids are going to IOPs coming out of hospitalization, or if they've been in treatment for a significant amount of time and it's just not enough for them and they don't have a therapist that can meet with them more regularly. That's kind of what I've seen. I know I've had a couple of parents who request that for their children through the therapist. And so that's also a reason that people go in it. And then usually they'll have kind of like, you'll kind of graduate out of the program. You'll go through the whole program and they'll have like kind of an exit, if you will, when you're done, learning all the skills and going through that program. So I don't know exactly what the requirements are, but definitely post-hospitalization is when I see it the most. Amy, I don't know if you have a different experience with that.
I was just going to say, I think of IOP as like a partial hospitalization program. And so if your student or child is already seeing a psychiatrist and seeing a therapist, and you feel like they need an additional level of care, then I would talk to the psychiatrist and the treatment about that.
Yeah.
Actually, the one right now in your school, she doesn't have psychiatrist, but she's in group therapy, and sometimes I have in the therapy with her. It's not sometimes, almost every week, but if I don't have time and I skip that week. So she kind of have autistic, and she kind of antisocial. She doesn't have to make any friends. So I don't know, that's crazy. It's qualified for 504.
Yeah, let's talk about 504. Like, you send me an email and we'll talk a little bit more, and I'll explain a little bit more in depth about if she could benefit from it. I want to talk a little bit about the risks of not getting treatment. So again, we have so many kids that aren't getting treatment, and what happens in my world when I was younger. My hope was that I would wake up one morning and my mental illness would be gone. I waited for a long, long time, and that didn't actually happen. And so the risks of not getting treatment are, worsening mental health problems. The depression gets deeper and deeper, and you start to feel more hopeless and helpless. Your quality of life. I ask kids, like, I do screenings for teenagers, and you can just tell, like, they are not doing the things teenagers should do. They just don't feel well all the time. They're not motivated. They have no energy. It actually, there's an increase in their risk for suicide. When you start to feel hopeless, that's kind of what happens. You feel like this is never going to get better. Even when you don't get treatment, you're like, oh my gosh, this is just going to be what it is forever. Health issues can come out of it. Sometimes people start self-medicating. It could be food. It could be, substances. It could be something unhealthy. They're going to find a way to feel that pain, to get rid of that pain, whether that's drugs, whether that's, risky behavior, things like that. Relationships are challenged. It's hard. It is hard to live with somebody who is struggling with their mental health. Being on both sides of that, I've had, my sons who've also gone through it. It is very difficult to be around somebody who's in a constant negative state. It's hard, and it makes challenges for relationships. Oh, sorry, I was having a hard time hearing. I don't know if you want to add anything, Amy, but performance in school is rough. You're not motivated. You're just not able to do the things that you once could do.
Yeah, with adolescents, we're definitely seeing students self-medicating, vaping, using marijuana, drinking, and we're seeing definitely difficulty with relationships, like not having friends anymore, or kind of like burned those bridges. Friends don't want to hang out with them as much, and definitely impacting school performance.
Usually when I talk to kids who are vaping or smoking, there's always, sometimes it's just fun, but more often than not, they are stressed, and it's the only time where they feel like they can actually take a full breath and relax. And so it is their way of coping with stress. So I've had a lot of students, probably my own included, who say to me, like, I asked my mom, I told her I was struggling, and she kind of just was like, minimized it, or didn't really take me too seriously. So if your kiddo is coming to you directly and asking for support, I really want to encourage you to just listen without judgment. The most important thing is to take them seriously, no matter how many times they say it. Sometimes it might sound like they're whiny, or they're complaining about everything, or nothing makes them happy, and it's kind of annoying as a parent, like, what is wrong with you? But really take them seriously if they say, hey, I think I'm struggling, I think I'm feeling depressed. Look for help, not just look for it, accept help. The biggest one, and I'm guilty of this one myself, is the follow through. I'm going to call Kaiser. I got you. Don't worry about it. I'm going to do this. And I don't. And then time goes on. And I hear this all the time, where my mom's going to schedule a thing, but she still hasn't. And then I have to call home, and, then the mom feels terrible because, life is busy, and it's difficult to remember those things. We're all busy. But just look for help, accept the help, follow through on that. If you tell your kiddo you're going to do something, they really are waiting and they don't want to bring it up and bug you again. Virginia, you got something.
I just wanted to ask, how do we handle, I know, you're great and our social workers, counselors are great. But how do we handle or support families of like primarily Vietnamese speaking, Spanish speaking? Because we can tell our students there's help, but getting that information back to the parents, to allow them, or like, in our meeting last night for the parents, these principals' copies are in primarily English. So how do we get the population who are not of English speakers, because a lot of times those are the ones who may need the most support.
That's a great question, Virginia. Virginia can help me with that one.
I was about to say, Yvonne, do you have an answer?
No. I
It's,
want an answer, but I don't have one.
so, and I like every week I feel bad. I know these meetings are in English, and translation services are difficult, especially in this type of format. It's hard because this is like off the fly, like as opposed to something that's like more prepared. My newsletter, if I don't know how many parents realize that, but there's a button at the top of the newsletter that translates it into like 30 different languages. And so like clicking on that and looking, yeah, like it, SMORE, the thing that facilitates the newsletter, that like the publisher I use, it translates. That's actually why I chose that one. So yeah, so we like information that I put on the newsletter that can be translated. We do try to, we have what's called language lines. So when Yvonne or Amy are speaking with a parent, like we can go through a translator to talk to a parent in their language, which we do. Like if we know that the parent's primary language is not English, then we will use that to communicate as a school. A lot,
especially if you're talking about mental health and suicide. Right. It's like I want to make sure the communication is the most clear. So even if they're like moderately comfortable in English, I always recommend that we use a translator, just because I want them to be able to really advocate for their kid and really understand what we're, trying to explain to them.
Yeah. But it's really difficult. I mean, it's, and I'm not gonna lie, I feel like as a school, we should be doing a much better job with this. And yeah, but that is a priority to make sure that, we're getting the information out in the parents' primary language.
Yeah, I agree with you, because most of Asian countries, they believe that mental health is stigmatized. So they just sweep under the rug and then just ignore it so completely. So it's hard to brought it up.
Yeah, it's very difficult, like, because I know culturally, like a lot of people have differing opinions, but one of the things is, one of my goals when I meet with a parent is always to find our common goal. And no matter what we believe in mental health, no matter what we believe about anything, our common goal is always that our children stay alive, stay healthy, that they're well. And so sometimes that's a good starting point with parents when we're talking about mental health, even if it's not something that they're comfortable with or familiar with. And so I always say, they're the expert in their child, I'm the expert in mental health, and together we can always come up with a good plan. In regards to parents, I just want to remind parents, like, and no matter how many times I say this comes up all the time, that your child's mental health is not your fault. You didn't do anything wrong. You didn't deserve this. You shouldn't, parented a little bit different. Like, generally speaking, it just happens. It just is. It's not something that you caused or you could have done something differently. We all have things where we could have done better, but in general, depression or anxiety just happens. And that doesn't mean that you did something wrong. Always schedule an appointment with your doctor, regular doctor first. I always want to rule out medical conditions. I'm not a doctor. And I want to make sure that all your kiddos' blood levels are stable and all those things before even going into treatment, because I want to rule any of that stuff out.
Yeah, I want to second that. When I was going through everything with my daughter, her pediatrician was invaluable with like getting me connected with the right supports. And that's how I found a psychiatrist, and that's how like I was able to get her into an IOP program, and like all of that, like going to the pediatrician first, huge resource.
Yeah.
You need a whole team. So
Yeah,
we'll talk a little bit about the different supports that are available. And the one that we're most commonly, referring kids to is counseling, counseling, psychotherapy. We do individual counseling. That's something that typically we ask families to get through their insurance because, Amy and I are not here through the whole school year. We want to make sure your kid has a consistent therapist throughout the school year that doesn't take Christmas break, that doesn't take summer break like we do. We will always be open to consulting with that outside therapist to figure out how we can best support your kiddo here at school. So I put our school resources here are kind of a reinforcement. It's kind of something additional that we have to focus on more of the school component or do check-ins, but we always want to establish a provider outside of school. And we have a ton of ways that we can help you do that, help you find somebody. When you're stressed out about your kiddo, the last thing you want to be doing is Googling therapists and trying to find out who's taking new appointments and all those things. Let us help you with that. We do have some connections. We do, know places we can recommend. We even have some services that are going to help you find somebody who's taking new clients. Not every therapist or psychiatrist takes teenagers. Not everybody takes your insurance. So letting us help you narrow that down. Family therapy is always helpful. I'm a big fan of individual therapy first. I think it's important to work on yourself, right? You don't have any control over the behaviors of everybody else in your family. And so sometimes I think kids get kind of forced into family therapy right off the bat, which I'm sure can be helpful. But I do think there always has to be a space where a kiddo can freely say the things they need to say, and it doesn't always feel safe in a family therapy setting right away. Not to knock family therapy, I think it's fantastic and there's a time and place for it. But if your kiddo is struggling with their mental health specifically, I would always start with getting an individual therapist. I don't know if you have anything to say about that, Amy, or if you feel differently. That's just my opinion.
I agree. Or doing family therapy and individual at the same time is a great option too. Just so there is that outlet for your student to be able to process some of that stuff that happened in family therapy away from family.
Yeah, I can speak to that as somebody who's done family therapy. So with my daughter, when she was in the IOP program, family therapy, and I think family therapy is usually a component of IOP, that there is a family therapy session. So she would have sessions like throughout the week. And then there was a time, like one day a week, where we had an hour of family therapy. And it was really a time, and like they actually like really worked with her and like things that she needed to say to us, and like and it was really good because it was like very, very much guided. And so that was really good. And then after, when she was done with the IOP, we did a program where she was doing individual therapy, but then they had like a group family component. And it was great. It was all through Zoom. I don't know if it's still through Zoom, but this was like at the height of the pandemic. So it was like definitely through Zoom. But we would, so they would have like, they would separate the teenagers and the parents. And so there was a parent group and the teenager group. And so like, we would talk about like parent stuff. And like, it was actually really nice and comforting to hear other parents that were going through the same thing and like the struggles with that. And then we would all come together and they would teach us a lot of like DBT therapy skills. And so that as a parent, you knew what skills your child should be using when they're when they're struggling. And so that you knew, you were very familiar with what they were, so that you could help and support that. Highly recommend the program I went through. Highly recommend.
Love it. This next one I put is support groups. There's different types of support groups. They're typically specific to whatever your need is, whether it's depression or anxiety or building, coping skills, things like that. Usually it's something that you get through your insurance, through Kaiser. Once in a while at schools, when we have the capacity to do so, we will run groups. Currently, we have an art therapy group going on right now with our students. And we kind of just assess the need of the campus. Our biggest need is anxiety. Our other one would be like substances. Virginia, you have a question?
No, I'm sorry. I just wanted to add on to what you guys were discussing. I've never had a family therapist therapy, but
Mhm.
it was really helpful when my son was in therapy, individual therapy, and I got individual therapy on how to work with my son who had whatever it was that he has, and how to deal
Yeah.
with the anxiety, and how to, because, as a parent who may have not experienced that myself and now has a child that does, I was getting frustrated. I was, losing my cool too soon. So it was really helpful as a parent to get that support and understanding, and also have the therapy for myself to understand myself. And it allowed me to know how to work with him, and what type of support I can give him in the home outside of his regular therapy. I just wanted to suggest that.
No, I love that. That's fantastic,
Yes,
because
thank
nobody
you for sharing.
tells us how to interact with our kids like that are suffering. Like, you just don't know that. It's not inherent. I felt completely lost with my own kid. And so having that support of like, hey, you might want to try this or do this, or, no, it's not your fault. And yes, you can say this. You probably shouldn't say that. Like, that is super helpful, because I didn't know. I didn't know exactly how to interact with my own child. I went to school to work with kids, and then it was my own kid. And I'm like, oh my goodness, this isn't working. Lots of trial and error when it comes to getting well. What we offer at school, just the school-based interventions, obviously talking to Ms. Cruz and I, the kids have the option to meet with us. We'll usually assess, but again, we'll refer out. We do check-ins. We'll do on-site groups. We're planning some workshops for kids. One of the workshops I'm really hoping to get going is something for students who are seniors and who are feeling a little bit lost, because maybe their peers already know what they're going to do, and they, are ready for the real world. And there's some kiddos that just think they're supposed to have it all together, and they're not. And so I want to create a space for that. Our SSTs, our student study team meetings, just figuring out, do we need support in the classroom for our kiddos? What type of accommodations do we have available? Daybreak is something that our district pays for. It is, I believe, is it 12 weeks of therapy
Yes.
that the district pays for? The only part that some kids aren't crazy about is that it is on Zoom, but it is a licensed therapist, and it is a good option, especially for families who are maybe in between insurance, or, haven't been able to connect with somebody that their kiddo likes. We let the kiddos, if they have their appointments during the school day, they can use the wellness center to have that space to take their appointment. And then it's kind of one less thing for parents to have to do, because they don't have to be driving their kids to therapy. We've had some good outcomes with that. So that's always an option for your kiddo. And then another thing that we have is what I had talked about earlier, is just helping you get connected to services within your insurance coverage. So that's something that we can help with as well. Lifestyle changes. I kind of want to share that, like, people ask me all the time, they're like, your anxiety was so bad. Like, how did you get better? And I don't have one answer, because it was so many things all working together. And I tell students all the time, sometimes getting well feels like a full-time job. Sometimes it's medication, sometimes it's therapist, sometimes it's, but exercise, balanced diet, making sure you sleep. There is no therapy better than a full night of sleep. I say that all the time. Literally, not sleeping is the worst thing. And if you're having significant issues where kids are staying up for 36, 48 hours at a time, please see the doctor, because that can be really dangerous. Having a good support system, having skills for, managing your stress and your anxiety, like knowing those coping skills, like these are all things that work together. So we don't ask that you pick one strategy. It's whatever works for you and your family, but just knowing that none of these things happen overnight, and getting well can be the slowest, most frustrating process that you'll ever witness, because as a parent, you want to see your kid feeling good, and it's very, very difficult to watch them struggle. But just knowing that all of these things will start to work together, but it does take time. It does take patience. It does take trial and error. I've had my kid on different medications. I've had him doing different things with different therapists, and, finally it all comes together. And to see him do well is so worth the effort. But when you're in the midst of it, it's a lot. It is exhausting. It's the worst thing you can imagine. I tell people all the time, watching my kid go through this was worse than anything I ever experienced for myself, because as parents, we just want to fix things. And this is something that we can't fix instantly. And it's very painful, and it's very difficult to endure. I'm going to talk a little bit about medication. Again, I don't I'm not recommending one way or another. I'm not a medical doctor. This is something to consult with your doctor about. Psychotropic medication couldn't be recommended as part of the plan. It's used to treat children's emotional problems. The way I think of medication, sometimes I'll get a student who will come in and will be so anxious that they can't even focus on what I'm saying. They're having a panic attack. They're not in a space. And if I'm sitting there telling them like, oh, just breathe, honey, just breathe and do this strategy, they're not even there. They're not even to the level where they can even access that level of therapy because their anxiety is out of control. So I'll have clients here and there who are just not ready to do therapy because they can't even sit in the space with me. Those are the kiddos where I always think a psychiatric evaluation is necessary. If you see a psychiatrist, you are not obligated to give your kiddo medication by any means. It is just a consult. In my experience, I've had kids that I'm not able to work with because either their depression is so low, they just can't even handle the process of it. Their anxiety is so high, they can't even sit in the space. And oftentimes I'll have them, meet with the psychiatrist, they'll start medication, and then they'll come back and be in a different space. It almost brings them up to like this baseline of where they can access therapy. Because if you've ever had a panic attack and you have somebody talking to you about, breathing strategies and squeezing your hands, it doesn't even matter. It doesn't even feel like it's going to touch that level of anxiety. In those situations, sometimes it's necessary, sometimes it's helpful. Again, your choice, but I have seen it be helpful, especially when it's just one component of your treatment. I don't want people just thinking that like, oh, you're going to go take your medication, you're going to be all better. It doesn't work like that. Being well is still a full-time job for me to stay well. I have to take care of myself. I have to sleep. I have to talk to my therapist. I have to do all of these things. I do not rely on just one treatment because our mental health is so much more complicated than that. So just a reminder, this is just one component, and this is something that would happen with your general doctor or with a psychiatrist. I have a video that I kind of liked, and this one was, I forget where it's from, but she pretty much sums it up pretty well. So last time, I don't think I had sound on my video. Is that true? Somebody told me that.
Did
you guys hear sound on my video?
But like we got the point of the video. It worked.
That's true.
Sorry. I actually almost said something last week, but I was like, is it supposed to be silent? Because they were very expressive in their like,
It's like a mime thing. Oh shoot. Okay, I'm gonna try it. Give me a thumbs up or thumbs down if you can't hear it. Just tell me and I'll make it stop. That's hilarious. Everybody was so kind to like not say anything.
It's time for another new Kansas City Spotlight. Here's your host, Lauren Scott.
Mental illness is one of the most common
Oh wait, it stopped.
medication.
Oh, I can't
I'm
mute
Lauren
it.
Scott, your host for Kansas City Spotlight. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Josna Adma from KVC Hospitals to address some common medicine misconceptions. Hi, Dr. Adma. How are you doing today?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing fantastic. So I want to ask you, how can medication help with mental illness, and why may some people be hesitant to try it?
Mental health is complex. Numerous factors and treatment approaches can affect a person's mental well-being. Psychiatric medications specifically can improve a person's quality of life by stabilizing their mood, relieving anxiety, reducing impulsivity, improving attention span. Medications can also decrease the risk of substance use and suicide. There is a lot of stigma around seeking help for mental illness and the use of medications. Some misconceptions include that medications are for weak people who cannot take care of themselves, but that is so far from truth.
Yeah.
When a person is willing to ask for help, that really shows a lot of strength. Another misconception is about psychiatric medications being addictive. Not all psychiatric medications are addictive. Some may experience a temporary withdrawal symptoms when stopping a medication, but that doesn't mean that an addiction has developed.
What is the process that KVC hospitals have when prescribing a client psychiatric medication?
So when a child is admitted to one of our hospitals, we conduct a full assessment to evaluate their physical and mental health. Then we create an individualized treatment plan for each child. Medications are prescribed only if clinically necessary. Anytime there is a need for medications, we discuss risks, benefits, side effects, and alternative approaches with the guardian and get consent before starting a medicine. If a child begins a medicine, the nurses monitor them closely for any potential side effects. We adjust treatment as needed to make sure that each child receives the approach that will give them the best outcomes possible.
What should someone do if they want to get some medication for mental illness, or they want to help a loved one do that as well?
So talk to a healthcare professional. They can complete an assessment to help you determine the treatment approach that's best for you. And anytime medications are recommended, understand the potential benefits, risks, and the cost associated with medication use so you can make informed decisions. Also remember that medications are not a cure. They often help the most when they're part of an overall treatment program that includes counseling and active lifestyle changes like meditation, exercise. So for more information, please visit our website.
All right, well, thank you.
It's time for another new Kansas City Spotlight. Here's your host.
Not my strength. For the sake of time, let's see. Oops. Sorry. I kind of like this one. A recommendation for medication is thinking of the word rare. What is the reason? What are the symptoms? What is it supposed to help? What are the alternatives to the treatment, including other strategies or other safer medications that could be used instead? What are the risks, possible negative side effects? And what are the expectations? You know, are we expecting it to just completely cure everything and make things go away? Or are we prepared to do the work required to feel well? You know I bring up my personal stuff, but, you know, working with one of my kids who went through the most severe depression, it was awful. I mean, it was horrible. I mean, parents who know. And we did therapy. He was even in a special school where they were doing therapy with him probably 3 times a week. And it just was not working. He was in such a dark place. One of the recommendations that I have is I had a psychiatrist through Kaiser who I absolutely trusted. And one of the things about her is I almost didn't give her a chance because she wasn't really warm and fuzzy. And that's kind of the experience I've had with some psychiatrists is they're not necessarily always warm and fuzzy like your therapists are. But when I think of who I want on my medical team, I would rather have somebody that is super knowledgeable than super warm and fuzzy, right? If you think about, like, if I had a brain surgeon and one was nicer than the other, but one was more skilled, I'm going with the more skilled. And so that was kind of my experience. And I'm so glad I did it. And she worked with us. We had to start and stop medication so many times. And I was losing hope. My son was losing hope. And when they finally got it right, it was probably a month, and I saw changes that I didn't think that I would ever see with him. And, you know, now he's thriving and he's in high school, and I know that was a huge part of it. And I'm so glad I trusted that process, because as a parent, we always want to protect our kids and we always want to keep them safe. And that is the scariest thing to even think. Like, you know, you hear all these horrible things about medication. You hear, you know, the side effects, or they make your personality flat, or they make your feelings go away, and all these things. The wrong medications could definitely do that. The not complying with medication can definitely do that. But I just ask that we kind of open our minds to the possibility of just talking to somebody if you feel like your kiddo is in a situation where their current treatment is just not working for them. It can be a game changer. I'll send this out. I'll have Ms. Davis send this out, but these are questions you can ask the doctor. Again, you're under no obligation to have your kid treated with medication. You can have a conversation. You can, you know, ask the questions. What is the medication called? Is there a generic form of this medication? When might my kid be seeing results? How would I know if the medication is actually working? What does it entail if we want to go off our medication? One of the things that can be very frightening, and we'll talk about adherence to medication, I think, in the next slide. Actually, let me go through this first. How long will my child likely be on this medication? You know, we think of it and like, I don't want to be on it forever is kind of what I hear. And for some people, it's necessary. Sometimes it is just something that they need, and, you know, they function better that way. And if we think about it as we think about any other health condition, you know, we don't really have an issue with medicating ourselves for diabetes for the rest of our lives. But when it comes to mental health, there's always that worry of like, what if this is forever? It might very well be. Most of the time with teenagers, it is not, and it's something temporary to help them get through that really rough patch. But ask your doctor, ask all the questions. It's totally within your right. Kiddos need your permission to see a psychiatrist, to get medication. And so make sure you educate yourself and make sure you advocate for your kids. Ask all the questions. So how do you support your kid when they are taking medication? Talk to them about it openly. The biggest thing that we need is to make sure that they're actually taking it every day. This type of medication is not Tylenol. It's not the kind of medication you take when you have a headache. Oftentimes it's medication that you have to take every day. And if you don't take it every day, that's when we start to see things that are a little bit more dangerous, increased suicide risk, decrease in mood, increase in anxiety. Like this is something that if you start taking the medication and decide that your kid decides they don't want to be on it any longer, please, please, please talk to your doctor and let them help you get off of it. This is not something that I want people dosing themselves or medicating themselves. I've had students come in and say, oh yeah, I felt extra sad today, so I took 2 of my Prozacs. And I'm like, no, you can't do that. So just make sure that you're in the room when the doctor's giving the regimen for the medication, and make sure that you're asking questions. And, sometimes the kids just want to do it on their own. And a lot of times they're able to, but just make sure you're in communication with them. Come up with agreements about refills. Who makes sure that the refills come? A lot of times kids are off their medication because they forgot to reorder. Things like that. That's something that you can help your kiddos with. Set a timer, have them put it by their toothbrush. Just do routines that are going to make it easy for them to remember.
Yeah, I don't want to freak you guys out, but like that's exactly what happened with my daughter. She stopped taking her medication. And it got very, very bad. And because I trusted, she was a responsible, oh, she's on it. My recommendation, if you have a teenager that's starting to take medication, you be the one to give it to them. And that's what I did. I set a timer, at 9 o'clock. This is when we were in distance learning. So I would go into her room 9 o'clock every morning. I would give her medication. I would watch her take it. And then over time, as she got better, I was able to back off. But I think when you're first starting this, don't trust them to do this on their own. My son we started him this year on medication for ADHD, and whoa, that's what I'm saying. Night and day, his school performance. Oh my God, unbelievable. But we set it by the door every morning with a little cup of water, and he takes it as he's putting on his shoes. We don't just trust that he's going to take it on his own. I don't trust that at all. So.
Yes, very, very important. And your doctor will let you know if this is a type of medication. And usually the SSRIs or those the Prozacs and the Paxils and the Zoloft, those kind of drugs are every day. So you definitely, if your kid's telling you I felt extra stressed and I took 3 of the, that's not really how it's supposed to go. So be open in your communication with your medical providers and with your children, because non-adherence to medication is where I personally see the biggest struggles. A lot of times I'll be doing a risk assessment, and that's one of the questions that I'll ask, are you currently on medication? Have you been taking your medication regularly? I forgot the last 3 days. Okay, that makes sense. It happens all the time. They're teenagers. They forget things. They forget to brush their teeth. They forget to take their medication. Help your teen become active in their care. This is something that I do because I don't want teenagers to grow up thinking that everything's going to be taken care for them, right? And so I have kids make appointments with me. I have them cancel appointments with me. I have them schedule their own appointments. Typically, they don't just walk into my office and have an appointment, because I think of it one day when they're at Kaiser, they're not going to have the ability to just walk into their doctor's office. So I really want to start to prepare them for taking care of their mental health on their own, being independent with their own treatment. While your teen's a minor now, it won't last forever. Prepare them to make decisions about their mental health. Be open about talking about options. Allow them to ask questions at their appointments. If possible, if you go into a doctor's appointment, one of the things that I think is really important is giving the kiddo at least a few minutes alone with their doctor. There are kids who don't want to share things with parents, and they won't share them with doctor because they haven't had the opportunity to talk to doctor alone. And then we're getting into situations where maybe the medication's not right, but nobody knows it because the kid didn't have the freedom to speak. So if you can, excuse yourself for at least a couple minutes so your child has the freedom to speak freely. And lastly, keep communication open about mental health. Let them know about your own struggles. Let them know how you take care of yourself. And just listen. Emails here. Again, this is a kind of a holistic approach to being well. All of these things can be helpful, not just one. And just remembering that it is a full-time job. It does require a lot of patience, but in the end, your kiddo can definitely get better. That's what I got for you.
Great. Thank you. Hopefully parents, you found this helpful. I think that this is something that we needed to talk about. I feel like we could continue and keep on talking about this. Definitely, if you guys, parents, if you have questions and follow-up questions, please email our social workers. Their email addresses are right there. They are the ones that can give you the best advice. I think I said this last week, if you just want somebody to talk to and listen, and maybe not necessarily give advice, I'm available. I'm more than happy to talk to you, because I've been through it, and I definitely, I know how hard it is, and it can feel very, very lonely. And so, I absolutely empathize with that. It does get better. It takes a while, and just to let go of the fear and to be able to trust, your child, to take care of themselves, takes a while, but yeah, it comes back. It's okay. So, our time is up. Thank you guys. I hope that you all have a wonderful Thanksgiving week next week. Remember, this is the first year that Eastside we have the entire week off, so no school Monday and Tuesday. We will not be here. So don't drop your child off, because we're not going to be here for them. When we come back, I think that's the 29th will be our next Zoom with the principal. Our topic on that day, after you just spent a week with your family, we're going to talk about family communication. So that's our topic for next time. Okay. Yes.
I just want to ask a question.
Uh-huh.
You kid on ADHD medication, I have problem get the refill because it's been back order everywhere. And
Oh my gosh, I'm not gonna lie, it's been a nightmare. Finally, what's worked for us is my son is on the lowest dose of Concerta, which is actually like the least popular dosage. And so we've gotten lucky, but actually getting it filled initially was horrible. We had some good luck with Costco pharmacy. Currently we're having good luck with CVS. Literally we called every pharmacy in the area. I don't know. And that's our the medical profession and the healthcare industry. They need to be doing better, because it is insane. And it was so frustrating, that, and the struggles I've had with my son, because he refused for years to try medication. And then he finally was agreeing, yes, let's give it a shot. And then getting it filled took forever. So yeah, I empathize with you. It's really, really hard. And so, yeah, just calling. And actually what we ended up doing is we were able to get the generic filled, as opposed to the brand name. And that has been working okay. A lot of times they say with medication that you shouldn't use the generic. It has worked for us. So I think that may be worth a shot. But my son's actually doing his homework on his own without me yelling at him every night. And my quality of life is so much better now.
I agree with you. You guys still work and I'm retired, but I'm so overwhelmed. I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
Who is that child turning in homework? That's awesome.
All right, everybody. So our time is up. Thank you so much. Really appreciate all of you. Have a wonderful week. Thank you so much.
Thank you.